The following program is brought to you by Arlington Community Media, where we tell your story.
This is ACMi News, recognized nationwide as the first place winner of the 2023 Hometown Media Award for News Access.
Thousands of people, including some from Arlington, turned out to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and learn much more about ancient cultures that thrived in North America thousands of years before Christopher Columbus. ACMi News will take you to the celebration in Newton. The Select Board weighs in on the final design for the heavily used Appleton Mass Ave corridor. This after the town heard from students, town leaders, and business owners. What is the next step? Stay tuned. They played pop, psychedelic, and rock and roll before a jam-packed crowd at the Regent Theatre. The Cowsills, who sold millions of records in the 60s and 70s, transported these folks back to the days of flower power, the rain, park, and yes, even other things. ACMi News is next.
From McLennan Park to Spy Pond, from Poets Corner to the Mystic River, we have Arlington covered, giving you stories that count from people who care. Reliable, trustworthy, dependable. This is the nationwide award-winning ACMi News.
Arlington and other municipalities statewide celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day Monday, October 9th. Hello, I'm Katie Chang.
And I'm Summer Maxwell. Thanks for joining us. You may recall Joe Biden was the first president to issue a presidential proclamation for this special day, which pushes back on the idea that Christopher Columbus discovered America and shines a light on the atrocities committed against Native peoples as European settlers moved to this continent.
ACMi News went to Albemarle Field in Newton, where thousands of people gathered to see and learn from Native Americans, representing the great tribal nations of the Caribbean, all the way north to Canada.
They told their story of profound resilience and survival. And even though they were denied their rightful place in many history books, they were there to set the record straight.
We have been, as a people, marginalized for many centuries. We were told we were extinct. At this point, we're telling the world that we, Taino in particular, because we were the first people to find Columbus lost at sea, and we were the ones who saved them from starvation.
Yes, it's important to me because I remember sitting in first grade in Puerto Rico and the teacher telling me that my people don't exist anymore. They were extinct. And also telling me that only 5% survived because chickenpox and other disease. And that was it. That was the history we learned. Until eventually I learned what really happened. And so it is important for us to be here and share who we are.
Celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day gives all Americans ample space to educate themselves and in many cases re-educate themselves on a much deeper level as adults about the atrocities that were committed against Indigenous peoples throughout our U.S. history. History that was barely even touched upon and in absolutely too many cases was never even taught in our middle school history class.
Anytime we get a chance to let the world know the Indigenous people from these various lands exist, we have a separate culture, and we have to coexist with the United States of America. And we can do that, but you have to understand that one time there was just Indigenous people here. People often lose sight of that, but history is what it is. However, we still practice some of our culture and tradition from centuries to past.
History is written, not to offend nobody, by the conqueror, the white man. And it is proven, science has proven that supposedly our people was extinct, the Taino people were extinct. But when they do DNA tests in Borinquen and in the Caribbean, 67% of people in the Caribbean still have indigenous DNA. That means we are not extinct. We're mixed, we are creolized people, we're mixed. So it's important to celebrate all that we are.
Our indigeneity, our collectiveness is what keeps us alive and what keeps us out there challenging and teaching people about who we were. And so people are starting to respond, and they're coming, and they want to show what they can do. They want to show our culture. And people are starting to respond positively, and we're very, very happy about that.
The change is happening. It's on its way. So we can learn from one another, and we have to work together for a unity of purpose. There's no other way.
The Newton celebration is now one of the largest in New England, and it's growing every year. This year's event hosted nearly 70 vendors, drawing members of tribes from across New England and beyond.
The Select Board has approved the final design for the Mass Ave Appleton Street Safety and Accessibility Project. A vote on the design by the engineering group Stantec was taken at the board's September 27th meeting. Town leaders say for years there has been a crucial need to improve safety conditions at the complex intersection. This after the death of bicyclist Charles Proctor in 2020, who was struck by a motorist while riding a bike through this intersection. The design team reportedly updated its plan based on feedback from Addison Middle School students, the town's Transportation Advisory Committee, and nearby businesses. The new design aims to improve factors like visibility, access to side streets, parking, driveways to businesses, and crosswalks. Among those speaking up in support of the new design was Thomas Proctor, the victim's brother and frequent riding companion.
I'm here today because my brother Charlie was killed at this intersection in 2020. He was my inspiration, he was my favorite companion, and he was my best friend. I miss him every day. If these proposed changes had been in place 3 years ago, my brother would be alive today. I hope that you can support these critical safety improvements to the Appleton intersection. I remember biking here with my brother, and I've been really impressed with the work of the town of Arlington done, the work that Stantec has done. It's frankly better than a lot of what other towns are doing.
The Select Board vote to approve the new concept was 3-1. The town now will turn things over to the engineering team so it can produce shovel-ready construction documents. The paperwork would then be submitted spring of next year for consideration for Mass Works construction funding.
We are now less than 1 month away from Arlington's November 7th special election, when Arlington residents will vote on a $7 million override for fiscal 2024 and possible tax relief for eligible seniors. Are you ready to cast your vote? Here's the latest. The town clerk is accepting applications for election workers to work the check-in table. If you're interested, you're asked to complete the online application and you'll be contacted about training. You may recall the Select Board approved early voting hours starting on Saturday, October 28th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. in the town clerk's office. That's on the second floor of Town Hall. The deadline to register to vote for the special election is Saturday, October 28th at 5 p.m. Get all the information you need to know about taking part in this special election by going to the town website, arlingtonma.gov/elections. Again, that's arlingtonma.gov/elections. We are now less than a month away from the Arlington International Film Festival, which will take place November 2nd through the 5th at the Capitol Theatre on Mass Ave. This is a chance for so many film directors, producers, and actors to feature films that have profound impacts on all of us. Films from all over the world. Here's a quick peek now at just some of the many independent films playing at this year's Arlington International Film Festival. And just a reminder, the Arlington International Film Festival will be at the Capitol Theatre at 204 Mass Ave, November the 2nd through the 5th. ACMi News Director Jeff Barnes will MC this year's festival. For all the information you need to know about this year's fest, just go to their website, AIFFest.org. Again, that's AIFFest.org. Hope to see you there.
Nearly 60 years ago, they were a family band, 6 very young and talented siblings from Newport, Rhode Island. After their first hit, they were on Johnny Carson, Mike Douglas, and Ed Sullivan, and scores of TV specials. The Cowsills made hits like The Rain, the Park, and Other Things, Hair, Love, American Style, and Indian Lake. Now, Bob, Susan, and Paul Cowsill conquered Arlington with a one-show-only event at the Regent Theatre Friday, October 6th. ACMi's news director Jeff Barnes talked to the Cowsills about their incredible act that takes us back to a glorious time in pop music.
I saw her sitting in the rain.
Raindrops falling on her, she didn't seem to care. She laughed there and smiled at me.
How does it feel to be back in Arlington?
It's special because it's home. It's special because when we had our band and when we were kids here coming out of Newport, Rhode Island, we played all the this is going to sound funny, they had teenage nightclubs back then, okay? And the comic strip was a big one in Massachusetts. And we played there all the time. So this was our training ground. I don't know, maybe that's it. So it becomes special when you go back to where you began.
Music has been really good to us.
Yeah,
so there's no reason not to be totally pumped and happy about that.
Life is actually a pretty great place to be, and you can lean one way or you can lean the other.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You know what I'm saying?
You made a lot of people happy, and I'm telling you, 90 minutes of people in line wanting to see you guys. And you're seeing that everywhere, and it's got to. You give joy, and it gives you joy. It's reciprocity at its best.
It makes us feel amazing.
It does make us feel amazing, and thank God that we are baby boomers, because our demographic is huge.
And they don't want to give up, and neither do we, so we'll go as long as anybody else will.
I mean, our music from that time was, come on, I don't want to be biased, but
let's all look
get
over
off my
our
lawn,
shoulders.
okay?
Yeah, you're right, bro.
Every generation thinks their music is something, but ours is it has longevity.
Yeah.
And what is the future for the Cowsills going forward?
Keep going. We got a Christmas offering coming out this summer, Christmas time, and going to make a Christmas album with our brother John on board probably for that one. And we have our podcasts and we do these shows. We're having a blast, and we're grateful for it.
For more information on all events taking place at the Regent Theatre in the fall and winter months, just go to their website, regenttheatre.com.
ACMi is currently joining the Cyrus Dallin Art Museum to piece together a major project which focuses on one of Arlington's favorite sons, the world-renowned sculptor Cyrus Dallin. ACMi is currently producing an oral histories program, area residents reading firsthand accounts of people who came in contact with this master artist and have a fascinating story to tell. This week, something different. Recently, an Arlington resident saw our Dallin series on this newscast and called the Dallin Art Museum and gave her own account about Cyrus Dallin in the form of a letter she received years ago from her uncle.
This letter was sent to me by my Uncle Al. It is dated November 5th, 1995. Dear Marjorie, in 1923, when I was 10 years old, my family moved to Arlington from a rented apartment in Somerville, Mass. The family consisted of my grandfather, grandmother, father and mother, sister, 2 brothers younger than I, a total of 8 people. The adults pooled their resources and purchased an 8-room house located at 66 Appleton Street. There were 4 bedrooms and a bathroom on the 2nd floor, and a kitchen, dining room, living room with a fireplace, and a front hall, plus a big attic, great for storage and hobbies. There was also a sun porch off the 2nd floor. Quite a change from a rental in Somerville. I lived there until I got married in 1941. And eventually, after several short-term living arrangements in various parts of New England, Carolyn and I moved to a house at 24 Lock Street, Arlington Heights. Interestingly, it was within walking distance of my boyhood home. I lived at 24 Lock for 47 years. Now for the Paul Revere connection. I don't know if this is still the case, but for many, many years, it was the custom on April 19th to select someone to impersonate Revere dressed in colonial attire and have him ride on horseback through Boston, Somerville, Medford, Arlington, Lexington, and Concord, following the route originally traveled by Paul Revere. He was accompanied by a retinue of motorcycle cops, politicians, etc., etc. and people with their kids would line the route to see him dash by. When he went through Arlington, he followed Mass Ave, except for a short portion from St. James Church, now St. Athanasius, where he would take to Appleton Street, merge into Paul Revere Road, and then rejoin Mass Ave. This was because that was the original route that Revere took as it existed then. The nice part for our family was that all we had to do on the 19th was to put out the flag and sit on the front porch, waiting for the Revere impersonator to gallop by. It was the task of the Boy Scouts on the 19th to position themselves at the junction of Appleton Street and Mass Ave, opposite what is now St. Athanasius, and make sure he would leave the avenue and take to Appleton Street. One year, in spite of that precaution, he missed out and went straight up the avenue. It was always a different rider, so one can't blame them for a small error. Now for the Dallin connection. Cyrus Dallin, his wife Victoria, and his son Arthur lived on the corner of Oakland Ave and Cliff Street, opposite the end of Gray Street. Next to the house was a huge studio, 1/3 of which was used by Arthur to carry on his life work, the design and fabrication of stained glass windows. Most of Cyrus Dallin's studio work took place on weekends and school vacations, since he was a teacher at the Massachusetts College of Art, then on Brookline Ave, Boston. Because neither his wife Victoria nor Cyrus owned a car, they relied on taxis to do local trips and public transportation to get to Boston. Since the college hours were 9 to 3, it meant Cyrus had to get up real early to get through breakfast and head for school. He would walk down Oakland Ave from his home, turn left at my corner house, go a few steps along Appleton Street, and turn right at Daniel Street, finally reaching Mass Ave, where he would board a trolley, later a bus, and proceed to Harvard Square. From thence to Park Street under, and so on, eventually landing at the school. It was a good 1.5-hour trip, and he was no spring chicken. Because school was over at 3 p.m., he avoided the hassle of rush hour on the subway. Often, as he was walking up Oakland Ave on the return trip, he would spot my grandfather trimming the hedges or rose bushes. Cyrus had heard through the grapevine that my grandpa was a professional woodcarver, and a friendly relationship was established between the two. On the road, he wore conventional clothing, but as soon as he entered the school, he would discard his outer clothing and put on a smock and beret, looking for all the world like a French artist on the left bank. Cyrus welcomed youngsters from the neighborhood to his studio and taught us how to model in clay, how to make plastic casts from the model, and, if we could afford it, have the cast turned into bronze by professional metal casters. I suspect most of the things that will be housed in the new museum will be the intermediate plaster casts. Plastic casts can also be duplicated in marble, but here again, this was done by professional marble workers. In the good old days, sculptors did their own marble work, as, for example, did Michelangelo. Whenever us kids used to visit Dallin in the studio or his home, he would regale us with stories about the Indians he grew up with. His son, Arthur Dallin, was born in France when the Dallins were living in Paris. Technically, he was therefore a citizen of France. He could speak French as fluently as English, and carried on many a discussion in French about art in Canada with my mother, who graduated with a bachelor's degree in art education. When World War II broke out, his love for France was so great that he joined the French army as a volunteer and, unfortunately, was killed in one of the battles that took place just before the Germans invaded Paris. When I grew up at 66 Appleton Street, the only library facility we had at Arlington Heights was a tiny room located in the Lock School, a room no larger than a living room. It was Victoria Dallin's dream and aspiration that an adequate solution to this was to have a separate building erected on the corner of Park Ave and Paul Revere Road. After many years of prodding the public and petitioning the powers that be, this finally came about, resulting in the erection of a suitable building. Unfortunately, after several years, the town was down on its luck and closed all the branch libraries. Vittoria would have turned over in her grave had she known this. It was never opened up again as a library, and hence the plan to make it a Dallin museum.
Few museums in the world are located in the town where the artist actually lived and worked. We are among the select few. For more on the life and times of Cyrus Dallin, just go to the website of the Dallin Art Museum, dallin.org. Again, that's dallin.org. The Spy Ponders had their hands full as they squared off against Reading in varsity football. Let's go to ACMi News sports producer Nick Antonakis, who was on the sidelines.
Reading Memorial High School has been a dominant force in the high school football scene for as long as many Arlington Spy Ponders can remember. The Rockets have made headline after headline after headline. Many of the Rockets' headlines have featured dominant victories over Arlington High. And while Arlington has had highs of their own, it always seems like Reading has their number. Despite the past, the feeling in Arlington was different this year.
I would say Reading because all my years of being in Arlington, I've always seen Arlington get wiped by Reading. And I feel like this year, it feels like a good year for us to beat Reading.
With all the anticipation leading up to this matchup on the road, ACMi Sports decided to take a risk we've never taken before. Take our entire production crew on the road to Reading Memorial High School to capture the game. While Reading's football atmosphere was something our crew had never experienced before, they were up for the challenge. We brought all of our sports production equipment that make ACMi Sports Production special and set out for Reading. ACMi Youth Coordinator Jasper Hamilton and I arrived early to the home of the Rockets with cars full of ACMi equipment. After 7 hours of setup, our crew was ready to do something ACMi Sports had never done before. ACMi Sports pulled out all of the stops, pulling off a production with a variety of graphics, camera angles, replays, and segments. While it took me running back and forth from the press box to the field to pull off sideline reports, it was just a fraction compared to all of the hard work our crew put in.
But they're going to need some wins here towards the end of the season, and ACMi Sports will be there to cover it. Obviously, a huge thank you to everybody at ACMi Sports for making this production happen, traveling out here to Reading and covering this game on the road. We'll be back in Arlington next week for the Spy Ponders matinee matchup on Saturday as we cover back in our regular stadium. But
from ACMi Sports, I'm Nick Antonakis.
Thanks, Nick. That'll do it for this week's edition of ACMi News. I'm Katie Chang.
And I'm Summer Maxwell. Thanks as always for joining us. Have a great week, everybody.
You can always check out our latest segments and newscasts on the web at acmi.tv/news. And don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ACMi News. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. You'll find us at youtube.com/ACMi News. If you have any news tips for us or wish to become a citizen journalist, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at news@acmi.tv or stop by ACMI Studio A at 85 Park Avenue.